With all that said, let's read from chapter 7 of the Philosophy of Freedom. This is now coming straight from the horse's mouth. We have established that the elements for the explanation of reality are to be found in the two spheres, perceiving and thinking. It is due, as we have seen, to our organization that the full, complete reality, including our own selves as subjects, appears at first as a duality. The act of knowing overcomes this duality by fusing the two elements of reality, the percept, the thing of perception, and the concept gained by thinking, into the complete thing. So the complete thing is constituted of an object of perception, the percept, and the appropriate concept for that percept. Let us call the manner in which the world presents itself to us before it has taken on its true nature through our knowing it, quote unquote, the world of appearance. In contrast to the unified whole composed of percept and concept. We can then say the world is given to us as a duality, and knowledge transforms this duality into a unity. A philosophy which starts from this basic principle may be called a monistic philosophy, or monism, which is the opposite of dualism. Opposed to this is the two-world theory, or dualism. Dualism does not assume just that there are two sides of a single reality, which are kept apart merely by our own organization, but that there are two worlds absolutely distinct from one another. Dualism then tries to find in one of these two worlds the principles for explaining the other side, or the other world. So either the dualist searches to explain the materiality of the world by describing it in terms of mind, or, as a materialist does, tries to describe mind in terms of materiality. But the dualist is starting from the false conception that there is mind and matter actually objectively separated and apart from one another in existence. Dualism rests on a false conception of what we call knowledge. It divides the whole of existence into two spheres, each of which has its own laws, and it leaves these two worlds standing apart and opposed each other. It is from a dualism such as this that there arises the distinction between the perceptual object, or the appearance, and the thing in itself, which Kant introduced into philosophy and which, to the present day, we have not succeeded in eradicating. According to our line of argument, that is, according to Steiner's monism, it is due to the nature of our mental organization that a particular thing can be given to us only as a percept, or only as an appearance. Thinking then overcomes this particularity by assigning to each appearance, or to each percept, its rightful place in the world as a whole. As long as we designate the separate parts of the world as appearances or as percepts, we are simply following, in this separating out, a law of our own subjectivity. So if we separate the world into categories of different appearances, then all we're doing is separating the world into categories which is following a principle of our own subjectivity. We're not saying anything objective about the world. We're just separating appearances according to our subjectivity. If, however, we regard the sum of all percepts, or the sum of all appearances, as the one part of reality, and contrast with this a second part, namely the things in themselves lying behind the appearances, then we are simply philosophizing into the blue. We are merely playing with concepts. We contrast an artificial pair of opposites, that is, the appearance and the thing in itself, but we can gain no content for the second of these opposites. So we have the appearance, that has a solid content, an experiential quality, but the thing in itself, we have no content for. We can't imagine what it is like or is. but we can find no content for the second of these opposites, for the thing in itself, since such a content for a particular thing can be drawn only from perception. Thus, every kind of existence that is assumed outside the realm of percept, that is, outside the realm of appearance and concept, must be relegated to the sphere of unjustified hypothesis. To this category, to an unjustified hypothesis, an example of an unjustified hypothesis is the thing in itself. Now, it is quite natural that a dualistic thinker should be unable to find the connection between the world principle which he hypothetically assumes and the things given in experience. So, the dualistic thinker, as such, can never find a connection between the thing in itself and how the thing in itself appears to us. So, we have the appearance of green, and then there's, according to the dualistic thinker, there's a supposed thing in itself causing that experience of green. But the dualistic thinker can never find an explanation as to how the thing in itself gives rise to the experience of green. A content for the hypothetical world principle can be arrived at only by borrowing it from the world of experience and then shutting one's eyes to the fact of this borrowing. So, in Bernardo Kastrup's example, the thing in itself is conceived of as mentation, mind at large. But really what this is simply borrowing from an instance of experience, one's own consciousness, and projecting it into the beyond as being the thing in itself, and then forgetting or shutting one's eyes to the fact of this borrowing. Otherwise, the thing in itself remains an empty concept, a non-concept, which has nothing but the form of a concept. Here the dualistic thinker usually asserts that the content of this concept is inaccessible to our knowledge. We can know only that such a content exists, but not what it is that exists. In both cases, it is impossible to overcome dualism. Even though one were to import a few abstract elements from the world of experience, so even if one were to import a few abstract elements, such as projecting one's own mentation, one's own mental consciousness, projecting that into the thing in itself behind the world, as the world principle, it would still remain impossible to derive the rich concrete life of experience from these few qualities, which are, after all, themselves taken from perception. So in Bernardo's case, there is the perception of one's own consciousness, and we're taking that perception and projecting it into the beyond as the thing in itself behind all other perceptions. But of course here, as Steiner says, it would still remain impossible to derive the rich concrete life of experience, everything else, in other words, of one's experience, from these few qualities, which are, after all, themselves taken from perception, taken from one's own experience. So how do things stand in relation to Steiner's worldview? Steiner's worldview is a philosophy of monism, oneness. It is a monistic world conception. And so Steiner's going to say now, the follower of a monistic world conception knows that everything he or she needs for the explanation of any given phenomenon in the world must lie within this world itself. It follows from the concept of the act of knowing, as we have here defined it, that one cannot speak of limits to knowledge. Knowing is not a concern of the world in general, but an affair which man must settle for himself. Things demand no explanation. They exist and act on one another according to laws which can be discovered through thinking. They exist in indivisible unity with these laws. Our egohood confronts them, grasping at first only that part of them we have called appearance or percepts. Within our egohood, however, lies the power to discover the other part of the reality as well. Only when the ego has taken the two elements of reality, that is, the appearance and the concept for the appearance, which are otherwise indivisibly united in the world, and has recombined these two elements for him or herself, is our thirst for knowledge satisfied. The ego has then arrived at the reality once more. Monism never finds it necessary to ask for any principles of explanation for reality other than appearance and concept. It knows that in the whole field of reality there is no occasion for this question. In the perceptual world, that is, in the world of appearance, as it presents itself directly to perception, it sees one half of the reality. In the union of this world of appearance with the world of concepts, it finds the full reality. I'm going to end it there. Thanks for watching.